Hey everybody out there in internet land, a little Wilsonian America for you today. President Woodrow Wilson, we're up to number 28. Dr. Wilson here, his PhD at Johns Hopkins University. Oh, wise guy, eh? Yeah. Oh, you probably don't get that reference. Let's see. If you recall, he he ran against two Republicans. He was the only Democrat to win, so he did not win a majority of the popular vote. He only won a plurality. But the other two guys, Roosevelt and Taft, they split the vote, and there you go. So one of the things that Wilson did, one of the first things he did was during his first State of the Union speech, he actually gave a speech. So I know you're sitting there thinking, but isn't that, don't they always do a speech? Well, no. It says in the Constitution, it says, Article 2, Section 3, he, talking about the president, didn't say he or she, it just says he shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the state of the Union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. So it doesn't say that you have to give a speech, you have to from time to time tell Congress what's going on. And since after John Adams, Thomas Jefferson became president, Thomas Jefferson was not a big, he could write. He could write. And he had nice big words, but he was kind of a stutterer. And so he chose not to give a speech. He would just send a letter to Congress. And from that point on, all the presidents basically just sent a letter to Congress. But Woodrow Wilson says, no, I'm gonna go down, walk down the street, and what was that, Pennsylvania, and go right up to the Congress building and knock on the door and say, hey guys, let me tell you what's going on. And so he brought it back, and ever since Wilson, we have the State of the Union speeches, and they've been televised ever since television, I suppose. So we do that in January. Yeah, is that right? January? Yeah, I think. Wilson is progressive. We'll get to that in a little bit, and he's gonna cover several things. Okay. Wilson is going to go after the tariffs and the trusts and the banks, right? The bank issue. And so we have the triple wall of privilege, and so he's going to knock them down. And then we have a political cartoon with him going after these guys. He's got his I was going to say his walk softly, carry a big stick. But that was Roosevelt. So maybe this is just carry a big stick. Wilson tries to convinces Congress to reduce the tariffs so that all the farmers have a shot at buying foreign goods. And let's see, the 16th Amendment, which is a progressive issue, the 16th Amendment to the Constitution is passed, and the 16th Amendment says that we can have a graduated income tax. So again, a graduated income tax means that the more you make, the more you're taxed, but then on top of that, a higher percentage of tax. And so if you make $100 and we tax you at 10%, and you make $1,000, we tax you at 20%. And if you make $1 million, we tax you at 30%. And by the way, those numbers are really low. I'm just saying that because those are the numbers that came in my head. But that's a progressive, a graduated income tax. The more you make, the more percentage we're going to take out of your paycheck. Good times. Which, by the way, we still do that today. Battling the banks. Okay, so as last we left with the National Bank, right? So, all right, here's the 30-second recap. Alexander Hamilton, we need a bank. Thomas Jefferson, we don't need a bank. It's not the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton, yeah, but it's not the Constitution, therefore we can have it. Loose construction. Thomas Jefferson said, no, you can't because it's not in there. George Washington says, I'm going to go with Alexander Hamilton on this one, so we have a bank. We have a charter for the bank for 20 years, and then it goes up. And then we're going to have a second bank, the second U.S. bank, and that's going to go up to 1832-ish. And who's president in 1832? Oh, Andrew Jackson. If you recall, Andrew Jackson said, bank. And he took all the money out of the bank, out of the National Bank, and he put it into all of his pet banks. Remember the political cartoon, all the chickens running around? Anyway, so the bank, when that charter ended, we didn't have a third bank of the United States. We didn't done, and so we didn't have a bank for, let's see, that was 32, and this is 13. It's what, 80 years? We didn't, we didn't have a national bank for 80 years. And Wilson's like, hey, we got to come up with a plan here, man. We got to come up with a plan. So, and we had the panic of 1907. We've had all the other panics. Wilson looks at it and says, we got to have something to stabilize our economy. And to do that, we need to come up with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So the Federal Reserve Act establishes the Federal Reserve, the banking system here in the United States of America, and we have 12 branches. Here in Oklahoma, we are in the 10th branch, which is the Kansas City branch. So what is that? That's Oklahoma, Kansas, a little bit of Missouri, Colorado, and a little bit of New Mexico, I think. So we're in the 10th branch of the Federal Reserve. Some of you already know that because you know stuff like that, and it's been going strong ever since. So what was the Federal Reserve do? The Federal Reserve is basically the at the top, and it's the last, what do they call it? The last chance, the last loan chance, the last chance of, doesn't matter. The point is, if you get rejected by the Federal Reserve Bank to get a loan, you're not getting it. But they're the ones that are going to establish and keep the currency level and make sure all the banks have all that kind of stuff. And so we're going to add more and more to the Federal Reserve and their power. And for example, insuring our money that we put in our bank and things like that. We'll get to that later in another video or 2 or 7. All right, so taming the trusts. As last we left with the trust, Teddy Roosevelt and President Taft, they were going after the trusts. They were going after the railroads. They were going after the oil companies, and they were reasonably successful in knocking some of them down and tearing some of them apart. And we have this president. What president? Wilson. Wilson. He's going to be doing this as well. He's going to have Congress pass the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914, and so the FTC, which is still going today, right? The FTC, they are in charge of basically, the short version here is they keep the playing level fair, the playing field level. They keep the playing field level so that from their point of view, but so that everybody has a chance. I was about to say an equal chance, but the Clayton Antitrust Act is going to basically expand on the Sherman Act. The Sherman Act is what Roosevelt and Taft are using to tear apart the railroads and tear apart the oil companies and et cetera, et cetera. And so again, the President Bush is pushing this in. He's also, but allowed for exemptions in labor and agricultural organizations. So if you were a labor organization, if you were what do we call those? A labor organization, then maybe you could be a trust. That's interesting. And he made strikes and peaceful picketing lawful. It's lawful to strike. Well, it was back then. Depends on which state you're in now. A lot of just progressive laws here. So just blow through them right here. At the top we have the Federal Farm Loan Act 1916. Give farmers nice loan rates. Okay, yes, excellent. Warehouse Act of 1916, farmers could take out loans based on their crops, use your crops as collateral. Oh, okay, seems legit. La Follette-Siemens Act. So this one is kind of interesting to me. The Siemens Act basically says that sailors in the U.S. Navy have been treated like garbage. And nobody has spoken up about it. That they've spoken up, but nobody's paid attention to them. And so, La Follette is an ex-sailor, and he's been trying for like a couple of decades to get somebody to listen to him. That these sailors, the working conditions for sailors are just awful, and so he's asking for certain things. And so, for example, and some of these are going to seem, well, anyway. Let's see, for a 8-hour day, okay. to have a minimum standard for food. You know, like not having bugs and stuff in your food. A minimum standard of food for food. To reduce the amount of punishment for certain offenses as a sailor. One of my favorites is, let's see, 75% of the people on the boat, of the crew on the boat, have to be able to speak the same language that the captain's speaking. I mean, was that an issue? I mean, I guess it was an issue because they actually wrote that down. 75% of the people on the boat, of the crew, had to speak the same language that the captain spoke. Huh. Anyway, Wilson ultimately was was not going to sign this, and then William Jennings Bryan, who was a representative at the time, was he a senator? Both of them were like, oh, we're not going to pass this. We're not going to sign this. And then La Follette showed up in Washington D.C. and he, an older sailor, and he looked like he was broken down, beat up, mistreated for years and years and years. And he walked up and he was basically like, "Please pass this law." And Wilson was like, "Oh man, I feel really sorry for this guy. All right, I'll pass this. And now you can't have bugs in your food anymore." Working Man's Compensation Act, 1916. So this is workers' comp. We'll be talking about that in AP government. Workers' comp for the federal level, workman's comp. So if, the short version is if you get hurt on the job, federal job, if you get hurt on the job, then you are entitled to certain monies or benefits, possibly. The Adamson Act, 1916. So the railroad workers, the interstate, which means cross state lines, the interstate railroad workers are complaining here because the railroads are not are making them work long hours. So the railroad workers, it's kind of hard to say, are going to they're going to threaten to strike if they don't get a reduced amount of work, a reduced amount of working hours, and so they're demanding 8 hours. So Wilson looks at that, and he wants to start negotiating with the railroad companies, with the workers, and the railroad companies say, no, we're not going to do this. And the railroad workers say, no, we'll work more than 8 hours, but you're going to pay us, overtime if you do. And so the railroad company said, no, we're not going to do that. And Wilson didn't know what to do. And then it dawned on him. And when the railroad workers said, okay, well, if you don't want to pay us, we're going to go on strike. And it dawned on Wilson that if the railroads go on strike, that could be an issue. And not necessarily because what you're thinking, but because he was looking into the future going, they're having issues over there in Germany right now, and Germany looks like they're about to, pull the trigger, and we probably need railroads just in case we get sucked into a war, here in about 6-7 slides on this PowerPoint. So he was thinking ahead. So the Adamson Act passed, and now it's 8-hour workdays for railroad workers. The last one here: restrictions on interstate commerce and employed child labor. Yeah, okay, makes sense. So Woodrow Wilson, as last we left the United States, we were grabbing the islands everywhere. Yeah, we were grabbing the Philippines and Guam and Puerto Rico, and we were trying to help Cuba, and et cetera, et cetera. So Wilson says, that's not really us. We shouldn't do that. We should more focus on what we're doing here. So let's not be as imperialistic. And one of the things he did was he repealed our privilege, the United States' privilege, in the Panama Canal. If you recall, Panama Canal, we built it, and then we owned it for, what was that, 85 years or whatever it was. And one of the great things about owning the canal is that we didn't have to pay. We talked about that in the last video, that it's based on your tonnage, how big your ship is, how much your water displacement is as you go through the canal. Well, we didn't have to pay that because we own the canal. Hey, free passage, yeah? And then Woodrow Wilson showed up and he goes, no, that's not fair. We should have to pay. I mean, it's our canal, but we should still have to pay tolls going through because, that's fair. So we did. The Jones Act of 1916. Let's see, the Philippines. Wilson, and for that matter, actually Teddy Roosevelt, but Wilson strongly believed that the Philippines should become independent. He was already making that plan as a candidate for the presidency. He was already saying, all right, yeah, we need to kind of cut them loose. And so the Jones Act was passed, and the Jones Act said that basically took away the United States had appointed governors and the legislature over there in the Philippines, and the Jones Act said no. The legislature and the government of the Philippines should actually be comprised of people from the Philippines, the Filipinos, and there you go. That's the Jones Act, and that ultimately the Philippines would be able to become independent. Let's see. As soon as a stable government could be set up. That's actually in the words. As soon as a stable government could be set up. I mean, then the question becomes, define the word stable. Stable government. Has there ever been like a stable government in the history of the world? I'd go through that. Let's see. If we go all the way back to like Caesar, no? If we go to like Genghis Khan, stable government, stable. Catherine the Great, stable. All right. Anyway, as soon as the Philippines have a stable government, they're going to become independent. Signed a treaty with Haiti that provided U.S. supervision over finances and the police, and we purchased the Virgin Islands from Denmark for $25 million. So Wilson, who's not expansionist, we're buying more islands. All right, moving on. Mexico. Excuse me, Mexico. Mexican Revolution in 1913. The President Madero, yes, he's assassinated, and the dictator Huerta, General Huerta, comes up and becomes the de facto, right? De facto, de jure. You know those words. De facto, de jure. De facto means like that's who actually is doing it. De jure is like who's doing it according to the rules, according to if you actually write it down, what it says in the Constitution. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's the rule. But what we're actually doing is de facto. So the de facto president became General Huerta. And he and the United States of America, specifically Woodrow Wilson, did not get along very well. A lot of refugees flew to the United States. Woodrow Wilson wants Mexico to handle problems themselves. But we get into a weird situation here. So there's some, down there on the coast over there by Tampico, Mexico, there's a oil field. And so oil. So there's some American oil companies. I mean, we just happen to be down there, and families and lots of people, and it's an American company, and we're down there, minding our own business, drilling for oil, making some money because America. And General Huerta and his gang have to deal with rebels. Well, the rebels who are trying to take down General Huerta are coming, and they start shooting, and they get closer and closer to the oil fields. Now, of course, the Americans, we're just minding our own business, not doing anything, being all friendly, because Americans were all very friendly to everybody. Well, we've got some battleships out in the harbor. 2 battleships, the USS Connecticut and the USS Montana? Not important. Missouri? No, it's not Missouri. Montana? Michigan? Texas? No. Anyway, two battleships. And so they've been told, make sure that everything's cool, and you help out the American oil company and make sure everybody stays cool. And don't let the rebels get too close. At some point during this time, there was a Mexican celebration for an Independence Day or something like that, and General Huerta asked one of the skippers of a battleship to raise a Mexican flag and shoot off a 21-gun salute, because kind of like just a celebration. So our battleship guy, our captain, was like, yeah, absolutely, Yeah, well, cool. And so he does that. So he sets off a 21-gun salute. Well, later, here come the rebels, and in the mix, somehow American soldiers, American sailors who are trying to buy some coal from the Mexican government, some American sailors are taken hostage. And it's kind of weird in there for a little bit, but eventually the Mexicans let these sailors go, and they go back to their ship. Well, the captain of the battleship's like, hey, not cool. You took our guys. I mean, you get back, but you took it. That's not cool. They were under an American flag. You don't mess with Americans like that. You don't mess with Americans like that. And General Puerto's like, yeah, all right, everybody, it's fine. Everybody's back to where they're supposed to be. And the captain goes, tell you what you're going to do. You're going to apologize, and here's how you're going to apologize. You're going to raise an American flag, and you're going to fire off a 21-gun salute. And Huerta said, ha, 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 over my dead body. And then people are like, whoa. We respected your culture, now you're going to respect our culture. And then President Wilson gets involved, and then people are saying, well, maybe you should raise the flag on your side too, and we'll both shoot 21-gun salutes, and then simultaneously, and then suddenly the word simultaneously doesn't mean the word simultaneously anymore. And then Huerta says, no, and Wilson gets all. So we almost go to war with Mexico. Like big war. The United States did invade Veracruz. Was it 200 people? 200 people died over this whole situation. And who knows where it would have gone, but we're about to get into a slightly bigger issue on the other side of the pond. Argentina, Brazil, and Chile recognize the United States is about to declare war on Mexico, intervene and pressure Huerta to step down, and then Carranza becomes president. And we're going to have, again, situations with him as well. But World War I's coming. Some pictures of Mexican Revolution stuff. So, if you recall from world history, let's see. There's Archduke Serbian, got ahead of myself. Austria-Hungarian Archduke Francis Ferdinand, and he's, somebody's calling me. Spam risk. Normally, I'd play with those people and go, "Hi, yeah, I'd love to buy your stuff." I'm in the middle of something. Francis Ferdinand, he and his wife, and they were out there in the convertible car, and they're driving through Serbia, and and then the assassin, and he misses him the first time, but then the car comes back around, and then Ferdinand's shot and killed, assassinated, and then. Because remember, the bomb didn't go off the first time. Okay, right. That was last year. So Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Serbia's big brother is Russia. Russia declares war on Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary's big brother is Germany. Germany declares war on Serbia, which means that they declare war on Russia. England, which is in a pact with Russia, declares war on Germany. Right. Oh, and then there's Italy. And Italy originally starts, I can't remember this from last year in world history, Italy originally starts with Germany and Austria-Hungary and Turkey. But then I think they see the writing on the wall and then they switch sides. Italy. Hey, I know which side to fight on. I know. I'm working on my Italian accent. So what do we do over here? United States of America, we announced, Woodrow Wilson, he announced that we're going to be neutral. Neutral. We're not going to fight on either side. We're not going to, we're not going to fight on either side. Even though, remember, we have the great rapprochement with England, we're going to declare ourselves neutral. Until Germany is like, hey, you're saying that you're neutral, but you're actually doing trade more with England than you are with us. And our response is, well, a couple things. They're closer. 2, they speak our language. 3, there's nasty submarines between us and you. So, Also, we didn't like how Kaiser Wilhelm II looked. I mean, yes, the argument is that he was an enlightened despot, but he had the hat with the little pointy thing. We didn't like that. So, speaking of the hat with the little pointy thing. All right. America earning blood money. Look at this. The United States trades most extensively with Western allies. Yeah, I just said that. And Germany is not happy about that. So, in 1915, that seems late. Is that the right date? Yeah, probably so. Maybe. The Lusitania. Let me tell you a little bit about the RMS, the Royal Majesty ship. Is that right? The Royal Majesty ship of Lusitania. So it was built as a passenger ship to basically do the transatlantic crossing. It crossed the Atlantic Ocean 202 times successfully. No, wait, 201 times successfully. And then on the 202nd time, not as successful. At that time, it held the speed record from point A to point B, from Britain to England and back, from Britain to America and back. It held the speed limit. It cruised at, are you ready for this? You ready for this big number? It cruised at 29 miles per hour. I'm converting knots just because, right, nobody thinks in knots. 29 miles per hour. That's moving pretty good for 1915. What else? It's pretty big, good size, and had a complement of about 1,200 people. So, good size ship. Just a passenger ship. There were 128 Americans on board, and they on the final trip. The Germans claimed that the Lusitania, I mean, certainly it was a passenger ship, but in its hold, I mean, it's a big ship, in its hold, in its compartment area, that the Americans were supplying the British with guns and ammunition and all sorts of stuff. And so the Germans thought, well, that's not good. That's violating the neutrality of the United States. The United States declared. So this is actually a military ship. So they sank it. Golly, there's so much more I want to talk about in the Lusitania, but I don't have time for all that. So they sank the Lusitania. 1,200 people died. 128 of them Americans, and that really irritated the United States of America. That's 1915. We're not going to declare war for 2 more years, but this is certainly a catalyst. Oh, hey, so then the question becomes, ultimately, well, I mean, were the Germans right? Were we smuggling guns to the British? Well, maybe. They have since after it was sunk, and then after the war, and then after the war, and then after a while, they did locate the Lusitania, and they've sent dive teams down there to kind of look through the wreckage. The problem is that there's still unexploded mines down there, and so it's very, very dangerous. Even in the year 2021, it's still very dangerous to go down there and look. There is evidence that there was no weapons on the Lusitania, but there might have been quite a little bit of ammunition. In the middle of all this, before we go to war, look at this, we're going to have another election, 1916. Did I talk about... Okay. Election of 1916. Teddy Roosevelt, he's going to be nominated again for the Bull Moose Party, and he's going to go, no, I'm not going to run, because if I run, and there's another Republican that runs, then we're going to split the votes, and Wilson's going to win again. See, people, at least somebody is listening to their American history teacher, and they're learning that if you split the votes, you're going to lose. So good for Teddy Roosevelt that he at least listened to his American history teacher. The Republicans chose Supreme Court of the United States Justice Charles Hughes, and the Democrats ran Wilson again, and Wilson is going to win. Wilson, political cartoon, vote for Wilson. He kept you out of war. Right, because he's not. We're not in war yet, and he's neutral, and he kept us out of war. And then people voted for him. Of course, we immediately went into war, but we'll get there in a second. 3 causes of war. 3 causes of war. All right, first one. Well, I mean, there's lots of causes of war, but here's 3 pretty big catalysts. The Zimmerman note. Okay, we remember this from last year. Arthur Zimmerman, the German Foreign Secretary, Arthur Zimmerman, is going to send a note to Mexico. And the note is in secret code. And it's sent to Mexico, and it basically says 3003843. No, that's the code. See, I was making fun of it. No, it says in the translated code. In English, it says, hey, I'm paraphrasing. Hey, Mexico, if you declare war on the United States, if they declare war on us, so if they declare war on us, Germany, if you declare war on the United States, Mexico, then when we win, we will make sure that you get Texas and New Mexico and Arizona back. Well, they could have Texas. It's Texas, but let's see. So that the note was intercepted by British agents and decoded by British agents, and the British agents then sent a copy over to President Wilson, and Wilson read the note, and he's like, "Whoa, no, you can't do that. Germany is clearly trying to rile up Mexico to attack us, and that's not cool, Germany, because we're neutral. We're neutral to you, Germany, and that's not cool." He immediately wanted to release that to the newspapers to tell the people, but there was an issue because he didn't want people to know where he got the note from the British, because that was all hush-hush spy, secret agent 007 kind of stuff. So he waited until they found a note over there in the Mexico embassy, and then they published it, and then a whole bunch of people were like, no, this isn't true. And then ultimately the German Foreign Secretary goes, yeah, I wrote that. It's true. So Germany is trying to declare war, trying to get Mexico to declare war on us. That's cause number 1 here. Number 2, at some point Germany said, you know what? We're tired of trying to get our submarines to be nice to people. We're tired of them looking up and saying, okay, what color flag are they flying? Are they flying a French flag or an American flag or a British flag? And Germany finally announced, they said, look, hey, you know what? New rule. If any boat that's not German is in the water around our submarines, any boat, we're going to sink it. And Wilson's like, whoa, that is no. And then finally, the Bolshevik Revolution. So the Bolsheviks, if you recall from world history, this is Tsar Nicholas II, remember, and the Rasputin thing, remember all that from last year. And then we have Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky taking over, and then you have Bloody Sun, all that kind of stuff. And then the Bolsheviks take over. And one of the first things they do after, they kill the Tsar, I remember Anastasia, good times, Rasputin, good times. After they, I cracked myself up. One of the first things they do is they pull out of the war. And when they pull out of the war, now Germany doesn't have to fight Russia anymore. So they can turn all of their stuff around and start looking towards the west, the northwest, and going, England, we got you, England. And so we are going to come to the defense of England. Woodrow Wilson gets Congress to declare war. And here we go. It is a war to end all war. A war to end all the wars. It's going to be the final war. to make the world safe for democracy, go USA, USA. And then finally, I like this quote, we are provincials no longer. The word provincial there means somebody who's like, who lives out in the middle of nowhere in the sticks and the boonies, that it's like, oh, they don't even have, running water out there. They don't even have electricity. Oh, the provincials. Oh, and he's like, that's not us anymore. We are USA. Okay. Hey, I'm going to take a break. I'll be right back. I'm turning this camera off and on. I'll be right back. See, it wasn't that long. All right, so we're going to get into war. Woodrow Wilson is going to, he's going to look at this war and he's going to go, hey, you know what? We're not just going to go over there and kill people willy-nilly. That's not what we're doing. We're doing this for moral reasons. We want to extend, democracy and self-enlightenment and awareness to people and all that. So there's a moral reason for us to go to war. Well, that's kind of interesting to say. And so Wilson comes up with the 14 points. I hope you're paying attention. It's important. The 14 points. This is his goal. When we end up beating Germany and everybody sits down at the negotiation, the peace table, that these are the points that he wants everybody to sign. So he wrote them out before we actually even really got into the war. So here's just a couple of them real quick. The first 5 points. Abolish secret treaties. So if you have a treaty with somebody, you should actually make it known. For example, the Bolsheviks and the Germans, when the Bolsheviks took over and killed the Tsar or pulled him out, and then they got out of the war, Wilson said, no, we shouldn't do that kind of stuff. Everybody should be just upfront with who you're friends with. Freedom of the seas. Interestingly enough, Great Britain didn't like that point. Removal of economic barriers, reduction of armament burdens, and adjustment of colonial claims in the interest of both native peoples and colonizers, etc., etc. And we go through the whole list. But if you only remember one thing, if you only remember one of these 14 points, it's number 14, and that's the big one. Woodrow Wilson envisioned a League of Nations. So an idea that you get all the countries of the world and you put them into one room, and they talk about their issues, and they solve their issues without going to war. The League of Nations, and this was a big deal for the progressive president, and so he's going to, that's the one he wants. So the League of Nations. I wonder if it happens. Oh, wait, we'll find out in about 8, 9, 10 slides. All right, let's see. So the Espionage Act of 1917 was passed, and it basically said, look, we're going to war here. You cannot interfere with any process which would hamper us in a wartime activity. And if you do, we're going to prosecute you. So in 1918, let's see, with the Sedition Act, made it illegal to speak out against the government. Have we had a Sedition Act before? Have we had a Sedition Act twice before? We have, haven't we? Okay, and you're about to say, oh yeah, the Civil War. Oh, and then the President Adams. Okay, right. Charles Schenck was the General Secretary of the Socialist Party in Philadelphia. And he said, we're going to learn here in a little bit that they're going to have a draft, a conscription act, which, if your numbers gets drawn, then, you're going to go fight whether you want to or not. And so Schenck says, nope, don't do it. So he got like 15,000 flyers, pieces of paper, and he went all over Philadelphia, and he gave them to these guys who were of draftable age, and it basically said, you have rights, and if your name gets called and you don't want to be drafted, you don't have to do it. So you've got rights. Well, he was arrested for saying that and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And of course, his argument is freedom of speech. First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law, ... regarding the freedom of speech. Abridging, not regarding, abridging the freedom of speech. And so there you go. Then Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the opinion, and he starts off with, the freedom of speech is not 100%. You do not have the right to shout fire in a crowded theater, which causes a panic and then tramples somebody just for fun. That you just shout fire for fun. You don't have that right. If your speech causes harm, like physical harm to somebody, you don't have the right to say it. You can be held accountable for that. He goes on to argue, and he says, Oliver Wendell Holmes, the justice, he goes on and he says, look, if there is a clear and present danger, I hope you just wrote that down, clear and present danger to somebody's actions, then the government has the ability to shut it down. So if whatever you're doing, and if we apply that to this case, Schenck is actively trying to stop people from being drafted, or who are drafted from going into the military. If he succeeds in this, then people are not going to go into the military. If we don't have people in the military and we're at war, that could be a situation. So Schenck is found guilty on these charges. Clear and present danger. AP government. Oh, we're going to spend some time with that. That'll be exciting. All right. Okay. So during wartime, you've got guys out front with the guns, but then you got the people back at home. And so how do you organize this? So the Civilian Council of National Defense, we have to organize to get the people over there. And so we're gonna move. I mean, ultimately, we're going to have a couple million soldiers who are going to be who are going to join the armed forces. How do you get them from point A to point B? How do you feed them? How do you clothe them? How do you, right? So you got to figure this out. We have the same situation going on right now in January of 2021. How do you get little bitty vials of vaccine for the coronavirus to 350 million people? I mean, how do you do that? Somebody's got to come up with a plan. So we got to come up with a plan here. Same idea, with the mobilization of so many men. Woodrow Wilson increased the size of the Army and created a shipbuilding program. In 1918, we have the War Industries Board created to oversee all the chaos. All right. So as last, just like 5, 6, 7, 8 slides ago, we were talking about strikes. So let's see, the War Department announced in 1918 that if you were not working, if you were unemployed, you would be drafted first. Well, if you're on strike, technically you're unemployed. So if I go on strike, I can be drafted and go fight the Germans. Or I could not go on strike and then and not be drafted necessarily. See what they're doing there? See what they're doing there, right? Wartime inflation reduces wage gains. And so wartime inflation, that's what happens during wartime. Prices go up. Unfortunately, wages sometimes stay the same. Prices go up. That means that the wage gains they don't exist. So your 99-cent cheeseburger is now $1.99, but you're still making whatever you were making before, and everything seems, with inflation, seems more expensive. And people went on strike because of that, even though they could be drafted. All right. In 1919, we had the America's biggest strike, the steel industry strike. A quarter of a million strikers. A quarter of a million just stopped working. The Northern Steel Mills hired African Americans as scab laborers, and ultimately the strike's going to collapse with political pressure. I know. We've been talking about this for like, I don't know, 8, 9, 12 videos. We're finally to this slide. Look at this. Oh, I mean, it's like, yay. The National Women's Party, led by Alice Paul, protested the war, but the National American Women's Suffrage Association supported the war. When the men go to war, somebody's got to work in the factories. So a lot of the women, they stepped up and they went into the factories and they did the heavy factory machinery work. Woodrow Wilson was so impressed with this that he went ahead and he got Congress to go ahead and vote on it and send it to the states and sign off on it, and the 19th Amendment, ultimately, which is going to be passed in 1920, so it's still a couple years away from us, but in 1920. Congratulations, ladies. You can now vote for the President of the United States. Herbert Hoover is going to be in charge of the Food Administration, and so the idea of part of mobilizing several million men to get from point A here to point B, Europe, you got to feed them. And so how do you do that? Well, I mean, that's a whole bunch of lunches to pack every day. Where's that food going to come from? Well, in some countries they do rationing, and so the rationing is they force you to eat less, or they force you only get so much at the grocery store, and that's all you can get. In the United States of America at this time, we're going to do volunteer rationing, and so instead of rationing at the grocery store, we're going to ration. I guess, through the day. So it's going to be like meatless. I have it there. Meatless Tuesdays and wheatless Wednesdays. So on Tuesday, no meat for you. And where's all that meat that you would have eaten on Tuesday? Well, that's going to go to the troops. And where's all the bread that you would have eaten on Wednesday? That's going to go to the troops. Wow, here we are in 2021. And it's not meatless Tuesdays, it's Taco Tuesdays, right? All right, the restriction of certain foodstuffs. Here we go. The restriction of certain foodstuffs. That's going to hurt the distilleries. If you hurt the distilleries, that means that foodstuff that used to be used to go make alcohol, potatoes, corn, stuff like that, well, now it's going to go to feeding the troops, so there's not going to be as much alcohol available, which helps Woodrow Wilson and the gang pass the 18th Amendment, prohibition, which we'll talk more in detail in maybe even the next video. It's getting close. So got several things going on all at the same time. Look at this. Hey, food is ammunition. Don't waste it. Did you know that was World War I? Did you know World War I want you for U.S. Army. The Draft Act of 1917. All right, so Woodrow Wilson originally said, well, we'll just have volunteers. And in the first, when we declared war, in the first 6 weeks, there were only about 75,000 people who volunteered. He was hoping for 1 million, and only 75,000 volunteered. Ex-president, or former president, Theodore Roosevelt, who's still with us for a little bit longer, he volunteered to get a group of volunteers to go over there and handle Germany all by himself, because, Teddy Roosevelt. And Woodrow Wilson said, no. I think we need a draft. And so they did pass the Conscription Act and the Draft Act of 1917. And so this is what Schenck was arguing about. Okay, so how does this go? If you are between 18, it was originally like 18 to 30. Something like 18 to 30 years old, and then as the war went another year, they moved it up to 45. Oh man, I'm so old. I'm not even draftable. All men 18 to 45 must sign up for the draft. And what's different about this draft than the Civil War draft was if your name gets pulled out of the hat, You could not buy your way out of it. You couldn't have somebody sub for you like they did in in the Civil War, where you could pay what, $300 and you could get out of going to war, or you could just say, oh hey, instead of me, I'm going to have my little brother do it. Nope. For World War I, it was everybody. If your name was pulled out of the hat, you got to go. Which means that there are probably a whole bunch of draft dodgers, but interestingly enough, and it sounds like it's a lot, there were about 1/3 people who did dodge once their names were pulled, that they didn't show up at the recruiting office. But that's a lot lower than possibly you'd think, because ultimately we're going to have not quite, we're going to have about 2 million over the several years. We're going to have about 2 million people eventually volunteer to talk about all the different armed services, and then we're going to have 2.8 million who are going to be drafted. So about 5 million. That's right. Yeah, 5 million people, Americans, are going to be involved in the military. Let's see. No one's able to purchase an exception. Women were allowed in the armed forces, but not on the front lines. Not on the front lines. One of my favorite World War I propaganda posters. Here we go. Gee, I wish I were a man. I thought it was. Gee, I wish I were a man. I'd join the Navy. What's it trying to do? It's trying to make you go, you're not manly. If you were manly, you'd be in the Navy. Do you feel like you need to go sign up right now? Because she's telling you. All right. He's kind of scary looking. So I had the question last year, I think, about African Americans in the draft. So Congress said we're going to draft whoever it is. And so African Americans are going to be in the mix. The various anecdotal stories out there say that when an African American would come up with their registration for the draft, with their, for them to apply or to volunteer, that there were some places in the country that they would put their papers in a different pile, or perhaps they would tear off a corner to indicate to other people that this is an African American who's applying, and there you go. And so we're going to have segregated units. We're only going to have 2 fighting units, I'm going to say the 92nd and the 93rd Infantry, but it might have been the 91st and the 92nd Infantry. But we only have 2 units that are comprised of African Americans who are going to go over to Europe. A lot of the African Americans are going to be put in menial labor, lifting and moving stuff and transportation and that kind of stuff. The Marines actually did not accept any African Americans. So just throwing it out there. 1917, 1918. We're going to get there. We're going to get America. We're going to get there. It'll all be fixed in the 60s. Oof. It'll all be fixed in the 2020s. I hope. Fighting in France. So it says a year after declaring war, Americans were sent to shore up France. Once those Bolsheviks pulled Russia out of the capitalist war and Germany moved west. So we are going to go over there. Now we're going to show up very, very late, right? Because let's see, Francis was assassinated in 1914. We're not actually going to get over there until 1918 that we're actually going to be fighting. And so Britain and France have been fighting for let me do the math, 4 years at this point, and we're getting there. We're gonna do this. A couple of propaganda posters. Destroy this mad brute. Enlist in the U.S. Army. Will you fight now or wait for this? As the evil Germans, and you can tell that they're Germans because they got the little spiky hat. And then over here, we got a similar poster, right? If you want to fight, join the Marines. Okay. Let's see, July of 1918. the Second Battle of the Marne, and so the British and the French are gonna halt the Germans' advance, and then we're gonna all start pushing back. We're gonna start pushing them back towards Berlin. U.S. General Pershing led American forces to cut off the German railroads in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. The Meuse-Argonne offensive was our largest battle. I'm talking about the Americans over there. It lasted 46 days-ish. Gosh, we had 26,000 Americans killed in those 46 days. Ultimately, I mean, we had, I would say, over a million soldiers in that fight. Maybe it's a little more than that. But one of the biggest battles we've ever fought, talking about Americans in one battle. So there you go. And we did help push them. We helped push them, kept pushing them east. So, yeah, USA. Germany realized the end was near. So the Germans are going to surrender on November 11th at 11 o'clock, which is November's 11th month. So 11/11 at 11. Oh, look at that, 11/11 at 11. We call that Armistice Day. Well, we started to call it Armistice Day. Now we call it Veterans Day. But over here in the United States, I think the rest of the world calls it Armistice Day or calls it VE Day, which is Victory in Europe Day. Let's see, the U.S. only fought 2 battles. We fought Saint Mihiel and Meuse-Argonne. But even though we didn't fight a lot of battles, like for 4 years or 5 years at this point, that the British did and the French did, the big deal for us was that the Germans saw that we were coming. And we can see that in some of their writings, post-war writings, that basically the leadership over there said, we probably could have held out, from the Germans' point of view, we probably could have held out a little longer, but here's the deal. We saw that the U.S. was starting to get their momentum, and we knew that once the U.S. got their momentum, they were going to come in and pancake us. So there you go. So, USA. I wonder how they teach that in German class right now. Let's see, this looks like, is that Paris? You say, no, Dr. Jones, that's the Statue of Liberty. Well, no, I think that's Paris. Didn't we get Statue of Liberty from? Right? Okay. Although, American flags. Oh, because we're the winners. Oh, okay, look. However, let's see. U.S. contributed food, munitions, credits, oil, manpower. Oh, right, because they saw that we were coming. All right, there we go. Okay, Wilson. President Wilson, yay, we win the war. And so President Wilson is going to take this and he's going to run with this. And so, as you know, that we have elections for president every 4 years, but we have elections for representatives every 2 years for the House. So Wilson's like, hey, we won the war, so you should all vote Democrat in the midterm elections. And the United States population was like, no, we're going to vote Republican, which is going to put a thorn in Wilson's side because now his Congress is not his, so it's the Republican Congress. So that's going to hurt him a little bit, quite a bit. Now Wilson is going to take it upon himself to personally go over there and negotiate the peace treaty. Please remember that peace treaties are signed by the Senate. They're the ones who have to approve the treaty. But Wilson, he's going to go over there and he's going to help hammer it out, and then he's going to take it back over, and just the Senate's going to just rubber stamp it. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be good, and none of that actually happens. Except Wilson does go over to Europe. He's the first president of the United States to go to Europe as president. There's the big four. You've got let's see if I can do this without. Okay, so that's the British guy and the Italian guy and the French guy and the American guy. Well, I think I got those right. David Lloyd, yes. Vittorio Emanuele Orlando. Vittorio Emanuele Orlando of Italy. George Clemenceau of France. And Woodrow Wilson of the U.S. So the big four, they're going to get down. They're going to get together. They're going to go into a room. They're going to start hammering this out. Now remember, Woodrow Wilson, he already had a plan. He already had the peace treaty ready to go. Right, the 14 points. He's going to push this. He's going to push it. Unfortunately, for the very first couple of days that he was over there, he contracted. We're talking about the president. He contracted what we now think was the Spanish flu. Spanish flu, 1920. It's recently been in the news. The Spanish flu, and so he was out a couple of days, and unfortunately from our point of view, the United States point of view, the French, Clemenceau, he kind of took charge, and he was like, hey, Wilson's stuff is good, but I don't know if we want all of it. And so by the time Wilson showed up, the other three guys were kind of already scratching through some things on the treaty that Wilson wanted. So there you go. Ultimately, Wilson is going to say, you know what, if you don't like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 all the way down through 13, if you don't like it and you want to change those up, great, that's fine, I understand, but please vote for 14, the League of Nations. Because if we have a League of Nations, we will never have another war again. And now that we've ended the Great War, hey, by the way, they didn't call it World War I. They called it the Great War. Because if they called it World War I, not knowing that there was a World War II, then that would have been, well, presumptuous of them. They were going to have another war, and that would have been foreshadowing that. So anyway, that would be like us saying, you know, the first American Civil War, awkward. So here we have the Great War. Oh, Wilson, League of Nations, all right. France is going to give up some claims. Italy demands some things. Japan demands some things. Interestingly enough, China is going to demand some things. And interestingly enough, Vietnam, a guy by the name of Ho Chi Minh, he's going to demand some stuff, and he's not going to get it. In fact, they're not even going to let him in the room, and that's going to really irritate him. And at some point, he's going to go, you know what? Forget you democratic people. I'm going to go over there and go join the communists. And then we've got, I heard that story. All right. Woodrow Wilson agreed to all of that, as long as he got the League of Nations. And everybody's like, yes, Woodrow Wilson, we understand. You want the League of Nations. We got it. We got you. All right. Germany basically, they didn't have any option with regard to signing the treaty. They had a huge gun pointed at the poor German there. They had no recourse. They had to sign it practically without even looking at it. One of the things that kind of irritated the Germans was that there was the guilt clause, the war guilt clause, and almost all wars have this. Peace treaties, almost all of them have it, I think. And it basically says, you were responsible for the war, Germany. Your fault, and you have to admit that. And so if you sign that, then Germany admits that. Yeah, the German diplomat's like, is it really my fault? Because if I recall, it was the Serbians actually started the war with the assassination, and then Russia jumped in first, and then we jumped in, and then Britain, and then so technically, but Germany signed it, so there you go. And a lot of Germans were upset about this, and here we have an interesting political cartoon. You have the Versailles Treaty, this was called the Versailles Treaty, and you got this guy who looks a lot like Hitler, climbing out of the Versailles Treaty, suggesting that the Versailles Treaty is giving birth to Hitler. Okay, is that all I want to say about that? Okay. So, everything's great, everything's groovy, and we have the peace treaty, and okay, good, yay, and we all lived happily ever after. Now, again, the president can't sign the peace treaty, so he has to bring it back over to the Senate, and the Senate's going to sign the peace treaty. And so he walks in the Senate doors, and some of the senators are like, I don't know if we agree with this. I'm not real sure if we... And the president's like, no, you do agree with this, because I'm the one who wrote it. I mean, I'm pretty much the one who wrote this. So you need to sign it, Senate. But remember, Congress is now Republican, so... So Wilson decides, you know what? Forget you, Senate. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on tour. I'm going to go around the country, and I'm going to drum up some support for this treaty. And then your people, the people that elect you, the people that are your people that you are supposed to do stuff for, they're going to call you up on the phone. Do we have phones yet? Yeah, we'll call you up on the phone, send you emails. We don't have emails yet. And they're going to tell you to vote for the Senate treaty. Right. And so he does. He goes around the country, and you see him going around the whole country right there in that one photo. Oh, he has a stroke while he's doing this. And doesn't recover very well, but I mean, he's still president. I mean, he's going to remain president, but he's not going to be the anymore. He's going to be a little more diminished. But he does. He goes around the country and he tries to drive up public opinion for the peace treaty. Problem is that backfired. Because the Senate was like, "What? You're going out and you're talking to my people? Our people? And you don't do no. We are the ones who actually make the treaty, President. You may have written it, but we're the ones who sign it. So, I know." Wilson brought it up twice. He sent it to the Senate, and it came up twice for a vote, and twice it was rejected, which is kind of interesting. Here we have a political cartoon of, let's see, we have the minister, and you have the girl, and on her wedding dress it says "foreign entanglements," which basically means the Treaty of Versailles. And then Uncle Sam, and he's about to marry the girl, and then you have the Senate. The Senate is jumping through the window because the minister's like, "Does anybody have anything to say against this wedding? Speak now or forever hold your peace." And the senator's jumping through the window, and no, stop. There you go. So the Senate rejected the peace treaty, which in itself is kind of interesting because all the other countries signed it, but we didn't. So then technically we were still at war with Germany for like another 2 years, and then somebody was like, "Hey, are we still at war with Germany?" And everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I think we are," because we didn't sign it. So they had to write a separate one, which is kind of awkward and embarrassing, but it might have made the national news, but for like a 30-second clip. But there you go. Wilson was not done. He said, "All right, Senate, you've rejected me twice on this League of Nations thing, but here's the deal. We're about to vote for president again, and I'm not going to run, but let's just make a deal, Senate. If the country votes for a Democrat, that means that the country wants the League of Nations. And if the country votes for a Republican, then, okay, you do what you want." Wilson felt really good about that. He felt like, because clearly the country's going to vote Democrat. And then they vote Republican. Let's see, Warren Harding versus James Cox. And Warren Harding becomes president, and that's it with regard to the peace treaty. So, which means the League of Nations is out. All right, now let's think that all the way through. The League of Nations, comprised of all the nations of the world who want to join, who are going to sit down at the table and talk their feelings out. And it's all great, and it's all wonderful, and it's all good. And the guy who came up with the idea, his country is not invited to the table. The United States of America, not invited to the table. Can you say that's a little awkward? If we want to look ahead and say, why did the League of Nations fall apart, collapse in a cloud of... probably the biggest reason, I mean, obviously we're looking at this through a American rose-colored glasses, but it's probably because we weren't invited to the table. Okay. Is that all I want to say about this slide? Oh, did I say that he became president? Harding's victory is the death knell for the League of the League for the U.S. and ultimately for the world, because there it is, the Daily Oklahoman. Okay, so we're a state. We've been a state now since 1907. The Daily Oklahoman. Harding is elected in a landslide. All right. Here's our last slide for the day. The betrayal of great expectations. After World War I, the United States of America we were going to do it. We were going to be in the League of Nations. We were going to run the world. We were going to be the big dog, the moral compass, the city on the hill, the shining lights. That was going to be us. And then the Senate said, no, we're not. We're going to actually not be involved in anybody's business. We're going to go back to isolationism. We're going to stay out of Europe's business because, we've done that so well. Well, we did that pretty well in the 1800s, mostly. And then, in the mid-1800s. And then, from 1900 to 1916, 1917, St. Lusitania, 1915. So for 15 years, we stayed out of Europe's business. But we're going to do it again. We've decided we're never going to get in Europe's business ever, ever, ever again. Why are people calling me? Why are people calling me? It's the same. It's this same spam guy. He really wants me to buy his stuff. Here we have Dr. Seuss. We're going to do some more Dr. Seuss coming up. We have Dr. Seuss. Isolationism. The little ostrich guy here in the center. It says isolationism, the hall of the extinct. Oh, don't look now. I think there's a new exhibit in the isolationist, because Dr. Seuss is going to point out that we probably need to go handle what's going on over there in Europe, because there's this other guy that's going to cause some problems. In fact, in the center it says the lady who's wearing an American First sweater, America First sweater, and the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones. But those were foreign children, and it didn't really matter. You see the title of the book is called Adolf the Wolf. Is that enough foreshadowing for you? Is that enough foreshadowing for you? Is that enough foreshadowing for you? All right. Hey, next week, 1920s. Oh, the Great Depression. Very exciting. Oh, no, wait. See, the Roaring 20s first, and then the Great Depression. I don't know if we're doing both at the same time. I don't know. We'll see. All right. I'll see y'all on Zoom. Be good till I see you. And then be good then, too. But be good. Bye.